preliminary results of the Metadata Standards Community Survey. You probably saw it go out on the listserv, but this spring, the Technical Advisory Council's Metadata Standards Subteam conducted a survey of the ArchivesSpace community to determine what standards we use in the application, and how we use them, and support for current and future metadata standards. So Kevin's going to show some of the preliminary results on that, and maybe have time for questions.
Hi, I'm Kevin Clair. I'm the Digital Collections Archivist at the Penn State University Libraries. I'm here today with my TAC hat on to talk about work that we did over the spring on the Metadata Standards sub-team to survey the ArchivesSpace community about what sorts of, how you all are implementing different metadata standards that are supported by the application now, and how you're bringing metadata in, pulling metadata out, why everyone is doing that, as a way to kind of inform what our priorities are for helping to develop the application. I wanted to give credit, first of all, to the rest of the people on the Metadata Standards sub-team. If you don't know our work, we're a sub-team of the Technical Advisory Council. Our job is to analyze the standards space, particularly in the standards that are officially supported by ArchivesSpace, which is primarily MARC 21, EAD 2002 and 3, and Dublin Core, the mods, a little bit for digital objects, things like that, and how they are successfully or sometimes unsuccessfully implemented within the application, and advising the development team on how to kind of better support those standards in the future. Here are our current members and our 2 members who rotated off when the teams recirculated at the end of the term. One of them is here. Hi, Elizabeth. Regina and Elizabeth helped with the survey last term, so I wanted to give them credit as well. Why did we do this? We, as a team last year, I think didn't have a great sense of what the level of use was for the standards that are currently supported in the application. We wanted to get a better sense of how people are using those and what problems that they're encountering with using some of those standards in ArchivesSpace for import and export. Looking for some gaps both in support for existing standards and potentially also standards that don't have official import-export schema mappings and things that we might want to help ArchivesSpace to work to support, and to help establish our team priorities going forward in the future. A lot of what we've done to this point is just kind of monitoring the existing import spreadsheets, export spreadsheets in MARC and EAD, and monitoring what actually gets successfully imported, what happens to the metadata properties that are in MARC and EAD that don't get imported into ArchivesSpace, and how we're communicating some of that to users, and help. So we wanted to still continue to do that, but also think about what else we can do to support using different metadata standards within ArchivesSpace. So our methodology, we drafted the survey over the course of the winter and spring of this year. It was open for responses to the whole community. We sent it out to the user group, mailing list on Lyrasis and some other places. It was open from June 10th until July 19th. We received, rows in the spreadsheet that I got from Qualtrics were like 145, but a lot of those were survey responses that were started and never finished. So we had 78 actually valid, completed responses to the survey, which doesn't lend itself to like real cool cross-tab analysis of how different types of users are using different types of metadata standards, but it's enough to give us kind of a big picture idea of what people are doing with the application in terms of importing metadata and exporting metadata that we can use to kind of move forward. We wanted to ask questions about user demographics and institutional demographics of who's using ArchivesSpace, what types and formats of metadata people are importing and exporting, what happens to that metadata after people pull it out of ArchivesSpace, and with EAD 4 on the way and EAD 3 sort of being used, but not really, as you'll see in the graphs. We wanted to kind of get at why people are or are not choosing to use EAD 3 to kind of inform, as EAD changes, we wanted to figure out how much sort of backwards compatibility we want to preserve in the application, which as it turns out is a lot. I'm going to kind of fly through these demographic slides. We'll see if they confirm or deny the priors that you all have. We were kind of curious, what types of users, like if it's a lot of kind of Lone Ranger situations in ArchivesSpace in terms of using metadata, and it's not. Most of the responses we got said that people are not the only person at their institution who are importing or exporting metadata. Most people rely on others at their institution or relying on third-party hosting providers to kind of help them with doing technical support related to ArchivesSpace rather than being like the one ArchivesSpace person at their institution. Most people who replied to the survey are located within the US. It was 11 out of 78 who were international. Mostly in Europe, one person from the Caribbean, but yeah, mostly Americans. 0 Canadians, which we were all very surprised about. I expected mostly academic archives. I didn't realize it was going to be like that, mostly academic archives, but yeah, it was about 75% of people were at universities or colleges. And quite a few of the others at the bottom said academic library is where they were, so it's actually even more so than what's there. And yeah, most respondents said ArchivesSpace is not their only system of record, and the other systems of record that were in play here were mostly library catalogs and OPACs, and the digital repositories were highly represented there. This was a little bit more all over the board than I expected. Everybody, I'm 77 out of 78 said archival description, clearly, but yeah, a lot of representation for container and location management in the application, and digital object description was also pretty highly represented here. Most people, as far as importing metadata into ArchivesSpace, are using the spreadsheet uploader. It was the most highly represented, and then importing back through background jobs, so bringing in EAD, finding aids, mark records as well. So this is what that looked like in the responses. Yeah, heavy use of the spreadsheet importer means heavy use of CSV and Excel data. So that was sort of the most represented metadata standard that people reported to us was spreadsheets over EAD 2002 mark. Like a third as many people are importing EAD 3 as EAD 2002 because you can't really import EAD 3 in ArchivesSpace right now, which is what we run into as well personally at Penn State. Can you hear me okay? Okay, cool, yeah. As far as exports go, I left out a slide for imports. That was this exact question, only with importing, but the responses were pretty much the same. It was most people importing and exporting both entire records and then just portions of records for different uses. Resource records are the most exported type of metadata from ArchivesSpace in various formats, followed by digital objects. Yeah, the digital objects piece, I think, this is the first survey like this we've done, but I imagine that's increasing over previous years. I think that's getting taken up a lot more by people. And then other export formats, we had a lot of responses to this question, people saying they export things other than what we were asking about. Primarily it's CSV, a little bit of just people taking the raw JSON from ArchivesSpace and using that as the thing that they're working with outside of the application. And then sort of a longer tail going down through a couple people using EAC CPF pretty heavily, people using MySQL pretty heavily, things like that. Most people using the staff interface export options, about a third of people using the API, and then less for the other things. We asked about what people are doing with exported metadata after it comes out of ArchivesSpace. Most people are importing it into other systems, which would be their repositories and their catalogs and whatnot. A few people populating discovery layers like ArcLight, things like that. We had a fairly long tail of other. We got a lot of sort of individual responses, but they all kind of lumped together into either they were populating reporting systems with it, they were preparing metadata for cleanup jobs, and they were going to re-import the metadata later, or they were doing sort of version control and backups for their finding aids. Everyone is doing stuff with the metadata. They're not just using the metadata as they get it. There's transformations that happen. We got quite a few like very unique responses. We asked like, what sorts of things are you doing? And it was a lot of nothing that we can really like recommend actions for ArchivesSpace with, because everyone's kind of doing their own thing as far as transformations go, which is a challenge for say. We asked a lot about EAD, and part of this is because EAD 4 is on the horizon, and we haven't finished our work plan yet, but it will be part of our work plan, and metadata standards is what to do about EAD 4. So we wanted to know, like, why aren't people importing EAD 3? Why aren't people exporting EAD 3? For the most part, we got a lot of responses that were to the effect of, we're importing EAD 2002 because that's what we have, and we're probably never going to import EAD 3 because we create EAD 3 finding aids by entering metadata into ArchivesSpace, and ArchivesSpace does the EAD, which fair. Problems with importing EAD 3, a little bit of lack of clarity as far as what elements actually get included in ArchivesSpace when you do imports and in what way, which is something that we on the metadata standards sub-team have been kind of working on as one of our priorities, is communicating to users what happens when you bring that stuff in. And exporting is primarily because aggregators don't support EAD 3 yet, so people export EAD 2002. What we're going to do with these results, that was like very superficial, everything I just told you. We haven't really gotten into the analysis part yet, but we're gonna kind of dig into the results and see what they tell us at kind of a deeper level as far as what people want from the standards that ArchivesSpace is supporting right now. We're getting ready for EAD 4. We're gonna continue our work to document how ArchivesSpace supports import and export of different standards and what it can do differently, and making recommendations to the development team in line with our charge, and kind of continuing to monitor standards and uses of data that people have. And if something starts to direct toward a particular standard that we want to recommend ArchivesSpace support, we'll take a look at that as well. That was quick. I have time for probably 1 or 2 questions, and then there's my email if you have questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, it was really interesting. You know, it was only 78 responses, but that does feel sort of reflective of what we're hearing anecdotally.
Also, that's like a lot of responses. That
is a lot of responses.
To any survey I've done, so thank you, everybody.
Yeah, that's a lot of responses.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments or any initial responses to that data?
Hi, Bree McLaughlin. So my institution doesn't really use EAD 3, so I haven't had to do any importing, exporting EAD 3 ArchivesSpace. But I was curious if there were any initial plans or takeaways for EAD 4. Touched on it a little bit here.
So kind of our EAD 4 conversations, Alex Dury came to our first team meeting of the year and sort of talked about how EAD 4 would be different, and we said, that sounds like a very difficult challenge for ArchivesSpace, and that's as far as we've gotten. But no, I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things that we are cognizant of is that ArchivesSpace is probably the #1 way that archivists interact with EAD as a metadata standard. So, like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure is not the right word, but like, yeah, I think I don't have a good answer to that question yet. But yeah, no, we're very aware, like, one of the things that we learned is like, it's going to be important for ArchivesSpace to get this right, because this is the main way people work with EAD is through ArchivesSpace forms. But it's not ArchivesSpace's job alone to make sure that the implementation goes well, and so yeah, there's just gonna be a lot of conversations that we'll have with different stakeholders and things as the standard develops. That was a non-answer. That was very political.
Thank you. That was a good non-answer. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say that.